This broadcast is the property of Codependence Anonymous. Reproduction without written permission from Codependence Anonymous is not permitted.
Take it away. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Cultural Codependency Workshop. My name is Isabella. I'm in Safety Harbor, Florida. I am a codependent and your trusted facilitator for today. I'm going to give folks a few minutes to get in the room. And those of you who are already here, I invite you to download and print the handout entitled Self-Assessment. Tamala, would you mind posting the link to that in the chat if it's not already there? Those of you who registered, pre-registered will have gotten a link via email leading you. Thank you so much, Tamala. We'll have gotten a link to a OneDrive file where you can download all the presentation handouts. So today, in a few minutes, we're going to start working with something called the Cultural Codependency Self-Assessment. So if you have access to a computer and a printer and are able to download it and print it now, wonderful. If not, we will have it on screen share in a few minutes, and you will be able to work off of the screen share. And in that case, you're going to want to have some paper and pencil. So take a minute to grab a paper and pencil and or print out the self-assessment so that you can get the most out of this workshop. Rest assured, though, all of these materials will be available to you after the fact. So if we run into any technical difficulties on either end, yes, the self-assessment, is it in a zip? I got to tell you, Tanya, I'm not sure. It may be in the zip.
It may be. It may show up in a zip file and you have to open the zip file. Isabella, on my screen, I'm only seeing you from about the nose down. And I don't know if that's happening to anyone else.
Can you change it? Can you change it?
I can't fix it. That's you and the way
No. I'm saying, can you stop screen sharing so I can see myself and also see people?
Oh, of course, sure. Stop sharing.
Okay, and we'll go back to that way I can, from the nose down. Okay.
So if you're there, you're okay. But when you were, whatever you were before, all I could see was from the nose down.
Okay. All right. That's a little weird. Let me push this a little further away. That way, if I lean in. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Great. Thank you.
You bet.
Welcome, everybody. Those who are just coming in, you're in the Cultural Codependence Workshop. I've invited you guys to download the self-assessment, which is a tool we'll be working with in a few minutes. I invite you to either access the self-assessment through the link in the chat, or you can check your email from either earlier today or yesterday. I'm not sure. You will have gotten a link to the OneDrive. Or just grab some paper and pen. Okay. All right, folks. So let me just begin by welcoming you. I am so glad that you're here. Again, I'm Isabella. I'm a codependent in Safety Harbor, Florida, and I'll give you more of an introduction in a minute. Once again, I'm going to invite you to get some paper and pencil or print and download the self-assessment that's in the chat. Lisa, if you would be so kind to stop the screen sharing for a minute.
Sure.
And we'll go back to it. I want to put it on gallery view real quick. Okay, so just out of curiosity, before we get going today, can you please, by using, most of you, I believe, are familiar with Zoom. And so on your screen, most of you in the lower right-hand corner will have reactions. So just by a show of thumbs, okay, either by whatever, enabling your video or by using the reactions. How many of you are in the United States? Okay. All right. Okay. So among the rest of you, okay, United American folks or expats, if you could put your thumbs down, of the rest of you, how many of you are in Europe? Okay. And how many are in the Middle East? Okay, it's difficult for me to see. I'm scrolling through the pages here. Okay. Yes. Okay. Technicalities. Maeve said the UK left Europe. All right. Well, we are still going to count you as Europe for the purposes of, we'll look at it from a geographic standpoint. How's that? Okay. All right. Anybody here from Asia or the Pacific? Us. Okay, US. Okay. All right. Well, it's so wonderful. Wherever you hail from, it's so great to have you here. We in recovery are a global community, and it's such a privilege to be able to share this space with you today. And in the spirit of this global community, we also know that our cultures can have an impact on our recovery. If anybody agrees with me that culture can have an impact on our codependency, raise your hand or gesticulate wildly, like, yes, it's had a profound and devastating impact on me. So I will tell you more about that in a minute. Before we get started, I just want to give you a little quick overview so we know where we're headed. I'm going to be giving you a little introduction to me and my own personal story of cultural codependency. Then we're going to be working with a tool that is called the self-assessment. It looks like this. You can access it through the chat or through an email that you will have received from CoDA with the handouts. Okay, we'll be doing that in a few minutes. So if you're having technical difficulties finding that, take your time getting it. And then the other thing is that if you really can't, it's a headache, you don't have a printer, whatever it is, we will have it up on screen and you'll be able to kind of fake it, with a sheet of paper and pencil. And we're also, as we work with the handout, we're going to have an opportunity to share a little bit about what's been illuminated for us, what we've seen about some of the patterns as they relate to our cultural of origin, whether it be a culture in terms of a country, or in some cases, obviously, we have cultures that aren't specifically country related, religious culture, for instance, okay, which was one of the factors for me. The other thing we're going to be accessing today is page 35 of the notebook, of the workbook, which is tools. And for those of you who are newcomers, I just want to point out that our core materials are the Codependence Anonymous Blue Book, for those of you who are brand new to this program, and this green CoDA workbook, okay? Both of these are available from core publications. If one of you could please, Tamala, if you wouldn't mind posting a link to the core page at your leisure sometime during the presentation. Those of you who do not have those materials, that's where the magic happens, is working this program. So you can attend meetings, you can even get a sponsor, but if you're not working the steps, you're not going to enjoy the benefits of recovery. So then we'll have a little bit of time for open sharing, God willing, and we'll wrap up at the end. So this is our ambition today. We'll see how it goes. So once again, I am Isabella. I'm a codependent. I am currently in Florida. Oh, thank you so much, Gerald, for sharing that. Yeah, if you have helpful tips, Gerald says there's another source in Canada. If you have helpful tips or comments, I do not mind. Go ahead and post them in the chat. So I am, my sobriety date is July 8th, 2009 in CoDA. And my sobriety date in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm sorry, it's not July 8th, 2001 in AA, and January 1st, 2009 in CoDA. So I just celebrated 20 years in 12-step recovery, and I'm so very grateful because it has changed my life. And I will say, I do mention, thank you, Tanya, I do mention that I am a recovering alcoholic because that's going to be significant to many of you. And I know today, which I'll share a little bit more about, that I really drank on top of my codependency. So even though I was certainly genetically pre-qualified for alcoholism, it's really my codependency that drove me to drink. And I am not exaggerating. So for those of you who are new to CoDA and maybe struggle with addiction, it is advised that you get sober, clean and sober first, whether your addiction is booze, food, or sex. So, or anything else for that matter, gambling, anything else. Okay. Because really in CoDA, we are going to be digging deep in our childhoods, and that can be very painful and triggering. So you want to be very well grounded in your addiction sobriety before you engage in CoDA. So I do have a sponsor. I have worked the steps multiple times, and I do sponsor people. And I say that to pre-qualify myself. I go to at least 2 CoDA meetings a week and usually 4 to 5 recovery meetings in total. I say all that because that's how this program works. So, in my other program, we say half measures avail us nothing. It's like anything else in life. The more you invest, the more the rewards. But I'm not going to lie, it's challenging. So I was born, my parents were Italian immigrants who came to the United States when they were in their 30s. They were highly educated people. My dad came to do his postdoc at Princeton. My mother did not speak English at the time. She also had a doctorate, but my father wanted her to not work. So even though she had a doctorate and was a brilliant 30-year-old woman when she got married, she submitted to my father and stopped working. Okay. So, number one codependent example right away. They came to the United States again to follow my father's career. And soon he was offered a job in Southern California. My mother, my older brother, and my father moved to Southern California, and I was born in LA. And on the surface, and actually a decade ago, my sponsor is in LA, even though I'm in Florida. A decade ago, I went to visit my sponsor and I went to my birthplace. I went to the address listed on my birth certificate. And let me tell you, it would have looked like a charmed life. These 2 well-educated Italians, starting a brand new career in America and Southern California in a very beautiful place. But listen, it was already a crazy house. My dad was an alcoholic. My mom was paranoid schizophrenic. Okay. Now she had not really had a full-blown episode just yet, but she already had a lot of idiosyncratic behavior that was very bizarre. And she was isolated. She didn't speak English. And I was born into this. So almost immediately, I became sort of an unnatural focus of my mother's attention. And really the groundwork for me being profoundly enmeshed with her was laid. Because my father was absent and very self-absorbed. He was very narcissistic. God bless him. I know something of his background, and I know that this is a generational disease every bit as much as alcoholism is. They moved to Maryland, and that's really what I consider my home state. I grew up in Maryland, and that's really when everything sort of started to fall apart. My father, got a tenured professor position. My mother still hadn't really grasped the language, hadn't grasped the culture. She had no real social network. She was very isolated. And so I became her companion and helper in every way. And for those of you who know about Southern European culture, and I'll be specific and speak to it, Southern Italian culture, the daughter being the mother's companion and sort of being the submissive, servile in a submissive or servile role is pretty typical. So culturally, for me to be servile and submissive and, enmeshed with my mother was not really altogether, from an Italian cultural standpoint, it made sense. Now, the other issue with that is that my mother wasn't just an ordinary Italian mother. My mother was a crazy person. So, and God bless her, she was powerless over her mental illness. And lo and behold, so was I. So when I was 3 years old, my mother had another child, my younger brother, which seems to have been the trigger for full-blown psychosis. A postpartum depression that turned into a psychosis. And the first time I remember her being hospitalized was when I was 5. And, you can imagine, for us children, my father, again, very preoccupied with his career. She did get discharged, but from that point forward, she was either well medicated. And when she was well medicated, she was pretty adequately functional. She was a charming, brilliant woman, had a lot of the domestic skills that an Italian woman has. She was very glamorous and wonderful to be around. And then that would stop abruptly and she would be completely nuts. And for whatever reason, I was often sort of the object of her paranoia or privy to her paranoia because I was her confidant, I was her best friend, I was her helper, I was her translator. I served a lot of functions in my family because my father was basically gone. And also partly due to my culture, my younger brother was, I was protective of my younger brother, and my older brother, being the eldest brother, was sort of put on a pedestal. And, my mother and I were sort of designed to be of service to my brothers. And so this is kind of what I grew up in. My brother started abusing drugs. My father left. At 15, I discovered alcohol. And I discovered that alcohol took the edge off of the extraordinary stress of trying to manage an unmanageable household. And that became one of my primary coping mechanisms. But it definitely wasn't my only coping mechanism. My other favorite coping mechanisms was finding alcoholic people that I could fix or broken people that I could fix, because that was like my whole reason for being, basically. I was responsible for my mother and wanting to fix my mother, my drug addicted brother, my alcoholic father. And I spent most of my teens and 20s either working on them or finding other people in my life that I could fix. And then toward the ends of my 20s, things sort of started to fall apart. The other escape I had was ambition. I worked very hard at jobs I didn't really like and wasn't very suited at, but I did well at them. And, all of my feelings of inadequacy and control, they, in a sense, they kind of helped me because they propelled me up the corporate ladder because I was so hard driving and so ambitious and so desperate for affirmation and validation and security. But on the other hand, the amount of stress that I was under between trying to manage all of everybody's life, including my own, really, I started to fall apart. And I found AA when I was 33 at the apex of, my drinking, the unmanageability of my romantic life, the unmanageability of my professional life, which was pushing me over the edge. But imagine, and I knew enough about 12-step recovery because I had spent so many years trying to fix other people that I knew to go ahead to, get a sponsor, go to meetings, work the steps. And I did that. And honestly, I will say now that for some people, AA is adequate to even address their codependency. It was not for me. And in early recovery from alcoholism, I met a man. Okay. There's the magic solution. I'm going to find a man. I'm going to find a man who's older than me, has more recovery than me. And also, importantly, a man that I didn't really have feelings for because I did not want to get hurt under any circumstances. So I figured I could control these variables and prevent myself from suffering needlessly. And I could also attach myself to a man because I really could not cope with these feelings that were exploding inside of me after I stopped self-medicating with alcohol. Because that's what happened. I just exploded with feelings and I couldn't even name them. It was just like an overwhelming, dizzying morass of feelings. So I got married. I quit my job, which I was making great money and, in fact, and was completely independent, owned my own house, quit my job, sold my house, bought a house with my money because my husband couldn't afford to buy a house and put his name on the deed. And, now I can see that in a sense, I was following my mother's footsteps. Whatever my mother's motivations, I believe my mother loved my father, but, she quit her job, was the financial provider for the marriage, based on her inheritance early on. So I was really paralleling my mother, even though it looked radically different in 20th century America than it did in 1960s Italy. And I proceeded to, and the other brilliant thing I did is I moved my mother in with me as a newlywed. Okay. My mother at this point, I had been her primary caregiver and she was living in a group home, perfectly comfortable. But I decided it wasn't good enough. She had to live with me. 7 years into it, I was at a breaking point. I was either going to kill myself, literally kill myself, or kill her. And thankfully, I found CoDA instead. And where I was living in rural West Virginia. So I was very, very socially isolated. I found a CoDA online meeting. Again, I knew what to do. I got a sponsor. My sponsor, who is my same sponsor today, was in LA. And we worked the steps on the phone 3 times a week, 30 minutes at a pop. And it took me a long time because that's really where the hard work started. Okay. I had worked the steps in AA. I was diligent about going to meetings, but really it wasn't until I found CoDA that the real transformation began. And since then, my life has changed dramatically. While in CoDA, I finished my bachelor's degree because in my 40s. I finished my master's degree, things that I had not been able to do. I hadn't been able to do them in AA. I hadn't been able to do them, in, my 40 years prior of living. I had 2 children, one of which had special needs. CoDA was pivotal in my ability to navigate that. And a year ago, I divorced my husband of 17 years, that very same man that I married in a blaze of codependency in early AA sobriety. So, what I've learned in this time in CoDA is how really high impact my culture was to my whole trajectory, both from caregiving my mother totally at the expense of myself. I made major life decisions. In fact, part of the reason I married my husband is he was good with old people. I made major life decisions based on what was good for my mother, what was good for my brother. But a lot of that really was profoundly influenced, not only by my culture in terms of being Southern Italian, where the women had a more submissive role, and even but also my religious culture. I was raised nominally Catholic, and I say this with great respect and reverence for the Catholic faith. I'm no longer identify as Catholic, but I respect the positive things that I got from that experience, but also the idea of dying to self, of being self-sacrificing. Now, if you're voluntarily self-sacrificing, that's one thing. But if you're being self-sacrificing because you've either been shamed into it or because you think you should, then it's like an accumulation of baggage that it's taken me 12 years in CoDA to fully unearth. So with that, what we're going to do next, I am going to begin with the step 4 prayer, the CoDA step 4 prayer. And then we're going to start working with this document. Again, this is going to be the self-assessment. And through this work, hopefully, you're going to get an opportunity to unearth some of the origins, the cultural origins of some of your patterns. I'm going to begin with the step 4 prayer, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask some questions before we get started. Let's just take a minute to take a few deep breaths to get settled. In this moment, I am willing to see myself as I truly am, a growing, unfolding spiritual being resting in the hands of a loving God. I can separate who I am from what I've done, knowing that the real me is emerging, loving, joyful, and whole. Amen. So I wanted to read the step 4 prayer because what we're going to be doing, and Lisa, if you wouldn't mind slapping the assessment up on the screen for me, we are going to be working through all of the patterns. And if you wouldn't mind, Lisa, scrolling up to that first Roman numeral 1 to denial patterns. Okay. Those of you who, again, can access the document in the chat or via your email, download it and print it out, great. Those of you who can't, what I would suggest you do is take a sheet of paper and draw 3 columns on it so that you can, roughly approximate the assessment. And, you can also, I will post my address in the chat, and you can also email me directly in order to get a copy of this. So as you can see in the first column, it's the pattern, okay? And now these patterns are the familiar patterns and characteristics that most of you are familiar with. And for those of you who are newcomers, the patterns and characteristics, which you can Google, just CoDA patterns and characteristics, are, some of the behavior patterns that we as codependents tend to engage in. And so what we're going to be doing is taking each of the groups of patterns, beginning with the denial patterns. And if you take a look in column 1 to the right of the patterns, you're going to rate using numbers 1 to 10, the degree to which this pattern is a prized or accepted cultural value or trait in your country/religion of origin, where 10 is very valued. So to give you for instance, from my own life, okay, we're going to look at the first pattern, okay, have difficulty identifying what they are feeling. Now, I'm going to say in Italian culture, not to stereotype, but, feelings are not taboo in Italian culture. But what a better example might be, and forgive me, my friend in the UK, if this is true, if this is not true, but, a certain stoicism is expected. So in certain cultures, you don't discuss your feelings. Your feelings don't really matter. let's not even discuss feelings. So if that is a prized cultural value in your culture of origin, okay, say for instance, the United Kingdom or a Germanic culture, then you say, you know, it's very valued. It's important to not even think about your feelings in our culture. And then in column 2, you're going to write a number, the degree to which this pattern has been most challenging for you in your adopted culture. Okay, so if in your adopted culture, say for instance, the United States, this pattern, having a difficulty identifying what you're feeling, there's a disconnect in, I shouldn't say that, I'm sorry, has been a challenge to you. Like, we had, and I think some of you know what I'm talking about. Another good example would be this. I had a coworker who was Chinese who came to the United States in her 40s, and her child was an infant when she came. And so by the time she was school age, the child was complaining because her parents very seldom, if ever, said that they loved her. In Chinese culture, that was considered appropriate. You didn't shower your children with accolades of love or whatever. But in American culture, this was a big disconnect because her child was always hearing other children's parents saying, I love you, I love you, I love you. Is that clear to everybody? Give me a thumbs up or post in the chat if that's clear. I can't actually see a thumbs up, so that's not going to be much help to me. But if you'd like, unmute yourself if you have any questions about how this step is going to work, because we're going to take 10 minutes. Thank you, Rick. So what we're going to do is how are we doing on time? We're doing okay. We're going to take, this is one of the shorter patterns. I'm setting the timer for 7 minutes. Do not overthink it. Just go with your gut. So in column 1, the degree to which the pattern is a good thing. Okay. Now, for instance, in a religious culture, dying to self and ignoring your feelings. Tanya, that's a good question. Can you give me more of an example? You don't have an adopted culture?
Excuse me, Isabella. Isabella, would you mind reading the question out? Because people who are going to be listening to the recording will not be able to see the question.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure. So are you suggesting I read A and then?
No. Somebody asked a question. Did I understand that correctly in chat?
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I was basically wondering, I came to this session because I feel like the culture that I'm in now, which is the same culture that I grew up in, is the,
it's at odds with healthy recovery.
It hasn't changed. Yeah. So I'm in the same culture of my culture of origin.
Okay. So then I would say at odds with healthy recovery.
Okay.
So,
okay.
For instance, you can be living, yeah, exactly. A religion, perhaps. Thank you, Carol, for clarifying. So just for those who are listening to the recording, what if you don't have an adopted culture, but that the culture you're in is at odds with healthy recovery? I personally would say if it's at odds with healthy recovery, then that's a cultural disconnect. So what is that? What is it that's challenging that cultural trait? So for instance, am I being clear? Excuse me, that's the timer on my oven. I will return. So I'm setting the timer for 7 minutes. Does that help you, Tanya? Can you work with that?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So I'm setting the timer, guys. Don't overthink it. And when you're done, will you please give me a thumbs up so we know the majority are done and can move on?
Cecilia, hold your question. When she comes back, we can allow you to ask, okay?
Okay. I hate to tell you guys, but I made the most fabulous banana bread. I would love to have you all here for a slice of banana bread. Oh, well, thank you, Carol. That's kind of you to say. Yeah, it's all about being real. All about being real.
Who has a question?
You have a question.
Okay, who has a question?
Hi, Cecilia here. I have a quick question for you.
Sure, Cecilia.
So I am originally from Argentina, but I came here when I was a kid. And there are things that I don't really remember from my culture. Is it safe? And so sometimes I don't know if those things were present in my culture or not. So I tried to do this pattern before, but I always had a disconnect about like what I could remember.
Right. Well, if you can't remember it, I'm going to say it's not, at the moment anyway, not really relevant. I would think in terms more of like what you do remember, because if there, and that's an important point. Thank you for bringing it up, because the other thing is your family can have a very distinctive culture. Like, for instance, a culture of secrecy. So does it matter if the culture of secrecy was born out of some Argentinian thing, which it could be, right? Because Argentina had the desaparecidos, which is very secretive. Maybe, but really, how does it impact you today? How did it impact you? I love that, Catherine. The problem with denial is denial. So I wouldn't worry too much, Cecilia, so much about tying it to your specific culture, because if you don't really remember, then it's not all that relevant. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Does that help?
So if at my home, my dad, mom,
your
brother,
family culture, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I can tie it instead of like my country, but my home. Is that fair to do as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Because all we're concerned about here is you. It doesn't matter really even where, like, I can trace my challenges to my culture of origin because I was immersed in Italian culture most of my growing up. But it doesn't, if you don't have that connection to the Argentinian culture, it doesn't really matter. You can, thank you so much. And actually, Carol is saying, could you ask your family if, for instance, some of these things are, may have been really related to your culture of origin. Excuse me again, I'll be right back. We've got 3 minutes, 3.25 minutes. I'll be done in an hour. Carol, I hate to rub it in, but it smells darn good in here. It does. And I would happily share. I don't have enough for 200 people, but they would be very small bites. And some of you have already made the point that the culture has changed. So even adapting to modern culture. And, you guys, you enrich this so much because when I first started, all I was thinking about was how my Italian upbringing was at odds with my recovery. But for some of you guys, you're making some excellent points here about, somebody said something else that was really good, and I'm trying to find it. Right. That the culture has changed. So even just, what was okay 10 or 15 years ago is no longer okay, and vice versa. How's everybody doing on getting it done? Because we only have 1 minute and 30 seconds left. You're caving to the dark chocolate. Yeah, Catherine, I can't blame you. I can't blame you. Dark chocolate is healthy, though. It's healthy. All right. Thanks for the thumbs ups, Karen and Melissa. Appreciate it. And, as we're closing in, we have 50 seconds left. I'd like one person to share. Oh, that's good. Very interesting. Yeah. Are you Romanian American and American Romanian? That's excellent. Well, that's a very good point. And I know that was more of an issue for my parents. It's something of an issue for me too, because I was really immersed. That's a good point. I would like one person, please, to volunteer for this section to share some, clear insight that they got from approaching the patterns this way.
We have them raise their hand.
Yeah, have somebody, we're going to just pick one person. If you got a real clear insight on a denial pattern and how it relates to your culture of origin, I would love to hear it, if you'd be willing to share it with the group. Okay, we're out of time, folks. Do we have anybody who would like to share an insight they got about the denial pattern having a cultural origin and how it relates to their recovery? Anybody? Oh, I've got a few. Okay.
Catherine was first up.
Okay, Catherine, take her away. Please share what insight you got.
Thank you, Isabella. This is great. Well, I'm German American, but I'm also Irish. And my family is very stoic, but my father was very alcoholic and my mother was very codependent. So we have those cultural norms of, a lot of these tendencies to not express feelings, hold it in, be strong. The night before, the furniture goes through the front window, but the next day we don't talk about it. Just things like that. And I think denial, all of these, masking your pain, being aggressive because you're angry. I mean, my life was totally out of control growing up. So it created a lot of anger. And if you expressed the anger, you were punished. So it was really stifling. Denial, when these patterns started diminishing in recovery, my other patterns started emerging. So denial for me kind of made me feel like I was okay. And then after they started going away and I started seeing through the denial, my other patterns started emerging, and I was really surprised. Thanks for letting me share.
No, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'll bet a lot of people can identify, and denial is a protective cloak. But in my own family, because my mother in particular was of a particular social class in Italy, and classism is probably was more pronounced in Italy at that time than maybe it is. I don't know now, but there was distinct classism, and there were just things you always had to appear a certain way, which of course in a really dysfunctional household is really toxic. Thank you for sharing that. So next we're going to do low self-esteem patterns, same principle. I'm going to set the timer for 10 minutes because these are a little bit longer. So again, just go with your gut. Say a little prayer if you get stuck. Southern Alabama, I'm sure the Southern belles had to be bells, didn't they? That's what, bless your heart, when you really mean burn in hell for all eternity. Right? Is that right, Roz? Yeah, people pleasing. Yeah, so culture comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. All right, the timer is going. You got 10 minutes to reflect on this.
Isabella,
Oh, wow,
I need
that
to
is a
step
big
away
difference.
for a moment. I'll be right back.
All right. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Is it pronounced Maeve? Such a beautiful name. Yeah. Okay. So you went from the UK, perceived as unselfish, to India. Oh, yeah. I can only imagine. So who was considered unselfish? Like you were considered unselfish, or could you elaborate? That's intriguing. Oh, Irish name and Irish parents. Dad also alcoholic. That'll do a number on us. To India. How long were you in India? That would be a big culture shock, I would imagine, going from the UK plus Irish background. Enough to make an impression, huh? You noticed it. You know, guys, I think once again, I'm gonna cut you guys short a little bit, just a little though, because I'd really like to be able to get through all of these and discuss them all. So we're gonna say 3-minute warning. What? Yeah. As you're getting done, please give me thumbs up. Okay, 1 minute warning. And again, I invite one of you to share an insight you got about your culture's role in cultivating or magnifying a particular pattern. In this case, the low self-esteem pattern.
Is that Lisa?
All righty. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for making yourself available for that.
Yeah, so I am African American, and I changed the things at the top because for the number one for my culture, I put African American, but then for number two, I put religion because it just made it more clear for me because that is something I chose. It's not something that, or I adopted. It's not something that I could control.
That's interesting.
So, under low self-esteem, I have a lot of more 8 under low self-esteem or lower numbers on lower self-esteem for being African American, and because of society saying someone's better than me, someone's smarter than me, just historically because of what society and my culture and others have said about my culture that I've taken ownership of, whether it being true or not for me. And then under my religion, I have a lot of 10s because I have these very high expectations of myself based on what my religion tells me. And so, I even have some for like having difficulty admitting a mistake. I want to put 10 plus.
Oh, wow.
My whole life, I've always patterned myself after trying to do the right thing based on my religion. And then appear right in the eyes of others and lying to look good. It's religion is 10 plus because, my family, we were raised in church. We went to church a couple times a day, on Sundays and a couple times a week. And so that standard was so deeply embedded and so expected in my household and then in my religious sector that I didn't have an identity outside of that. And so to do this way and for me to divide it the way that I did made it a lot more clear to me of what's going on with me and what's controlling me, as opposed to me really having my own identity and figuring out who I am. And so just being in CoDA and this workshop has really, really been really helpful for me. Actually, I'm feeling some emotions, even around filling this out because it's bringing some awareness to me that I never took advantage of.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Lisa, for your vulnerability and sharing that. I know I identify a lot with the religious and the need to appear a certain way and this impossibly high standard that I can't maintain. I'm sure a lot of other people can identify with that. And I appreciate your honesty about it. And for those of you who are feeling a little churned up, because it's painful facing these things about ourselves. And I know it was challenging for me, but if you can feel it, you can heal it. So feeling the feelings is the gateway to freedom. I believe that wholeheartedly. I've lived it. And I hope that you can pick up that I'm at peace with a lot of the junk I have in the trunk. And, I still have junk in the trunk. And the other thing is that awareness has its own weight. So even if we're still struggling with a particular behavior or pattern, the fact that we're aware of it is life-changing because we can say, we feel that reaction coming up in us and we go, okay, wait a minute. What's this about? Oh, I know I got that religious monkey on my back that's telling me to feel ashamed that I had this feeling or whatever. And just having the awareness can help us to choose a different response and also to have compassion for ourselves. And And I encourage you guys, Tanya, you too are a Black woman. I hope those of you, when you hear somebody you identify with, reach out to them privately or publicly in the chat and ask for their phone number, or if they posted their phone number, like Lisa had her phone number posted. Reach out to those people, because there's a lot of healing in connecting with people. So we're going to move on to the compliance patterns. I'm going to shave off a little time because I do want to leave a little more room for dialogue, because you guys are a very engaged group and I'm so grateful for that, but I want to give you guys a chance to share more. So we're going to give 4 minutes to the compliance patterns. You know the drill. Take it away. Two-minute warning. Wow, Cornell, that sounds intense. I'm sorry you went through that. I don't understand it, but I have compassion for it. Yeah, I'll bet. I'll bet it did. Thank you for sharing that. One-minute warning, and I'm looking for. Oh, great, Whitney. Whitney, you're willing to share on the subject of compliance? Go ahead and unmute, Whitney.
Okay.
Cecilia,
hi.
Cecilia, maybe you'd like to be first in line for what is it? Avoidance is next. I don't remember what's next. Control. Oh, that's a good one. All right, go ahead, Whitney.
Hi, I'm Whitney, recovering codependent from Arizona. So my mother's side is Palestinian, and a big mantra was you have to do it because you're family. And so it's this loyalty and compromising what you want to do because you're family, and like that's just what Arabs do for each other. And so it was always like, that's a continued battle I have of just this loyalty and doing stuff for your family, and kind of using the culture and the family as like a weapon. And I've talked about this in my CoDA groups, is like, this is your culture, this is what you have to do. And so it's been a tough thing for me in my recovery, is battling the cultural side, and which planted a lot of the codependency patterns into me, but understanding and separating the two. So a lot of compliance in regards to my culture. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's very, I can only imagine how, I was so isolated from my family in Italy that even though that is sort of a core Italian value, the whole family above everything, I was kind of given a reprieve from that because most of my family was in Italy and we were here. Thank you for sharing that. So we're going to move on now to the control patterns, certainly one of my personal favorites. I am going to, let's see. Oh, we're so running out of time. I'm going to give us 4 minutes. Not even. I'm going to give you 3. I'm going to give you 3 minutes because then we have the avoidance patterns too. One minute warning. Do I have somebody who's willing to share the control pattern that they feel is associated with their culture? Anybody? Okay. Well, we can move on so that we have a little bit of time to wrap it up. So the avoidance patterns, now I suspect these might yield some real obvious cultural connections. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. You know, actually, you guys, we only have 15 minutes left. Well, go ahead and take the 3 minutes. That'll give us 10 minutes to try to talk a little bit more about the solution. Thank you, Jeffy. All right, guys, would anybody like to share an avoidance pattern? Some clarity they got about avoidance patterns?
Oh, I'm Terry, and I'm codependent, and I would like to share on that.
Please do.
This one actually kind of helped me think through what my current culture is, because right now, I would say it's my work culture that I adopted. So I have my culture of origin, which I would say would be my family and in American.
Interesting.
And then the culture that I've adopted is really like within my profession. And so the ones that stood out to me the most were D and E, which were very pervasive in both of those cultures, where like with D, I thought of this busy, 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 busy. Like we're addicted to people, places, and things, and everybody's just busy. And we're so busy to actually really, truly have intimacy. And then I see that pervasive in my work culture now, where we just talk about work all the time, and we don't even acknowledge who we are as people, even though we spend the most time of our lives at work, and then use indirect or evasive communication to avoid conflict or confrontation. Like I think there's been a lot of passive aggressive communication that happened in my culture of origin, as well as in my work culture, because people feel like, that's the way to get what they want, and it's not. And I know that, but since I'm so steeped in it, it's really a challenge in my recovery.
Yeah, that's an excellent example, Tanya. I think it's very important to note this whole idea of culture. Thank you for broadening the topic for us, because it's really true. I mean, it's not so much, we all face challenges as individuals dealing with our codependency, but when you're fighting against an entire culture that is valuing something that in your own recovery is not healthy, that doubles the challenge. But again, I circle back to my heartfelt belief that, awareness carries its own weight. Just being aware, okay, that's the culture in this organization, but I don't need to buy into it and sacrifice myself on the altar of this. And, and there are people who end up having to, like, I quit a job because I didn't quit a job. I actually didn't embark on a career. I taught high school for a year. I'm not a career teacher, but I taught high school during COVID. And I'm very grateful for for having done it, but I did not pursue teaching as a career because for me as a codependent, it was like a suicide mission. I mean, in my school system anyway, maybe in another school system, it might have not been. And also just to pursue the certification. So that's an outstanding point. And we need to all be aware of how those cultures might be working against us. And we just need to be aware of it. So the next step was going to be, and we're going to try to consolidate this in the 10 minutes that we have left, and I'm going to walk you through it. And item B on page 4 of the handout is to go back and to circle your 3 highest scores in each column, and make those kind of the focus of your recovery work. Moving on to then letter C on page 5 is to write down some examples like Tanya talked about it, like we're so focused on work that we don't even connect as humans anymore, don't recognize each other as people with, feelings, etc., or whatever. So, you can continue this work after the call and we'll see how far we can get together. But on item C, then you would use some examples of where this pattern, the culturally magnified pattern, shows up in real life. And then finally, in terms of solutions on page 6, I was suggesting that we do some group brainstorming, useful tools and alternative ways to deal with a particular pattern that shows up in our life. So, let's see if we can do, and as far as the tools are concerned, there is a handout for tools. I don't know that we need to put it up necessarily. Oh, thank you so much. You're psychic Lisa. And I want to take a minute before I forget to thank Lisa and Tamala, who so kindly offered to help with this workshop today. Again, newcomers, would anybody like to share, what would be ideal is if there is a pattern that you've identified, like Tanya just did, where you see it, you run into it a lot. Or the other young lady who is in an Arab family where they're constantly wanting her to do or not do something in the interest of her belonging to an Arab family. If somebody else would like to share some pattern they see, like, I'm going to be dealing with this a lot. Because if there's a particular pattern and trigger that you encounter a lot, those are the ones that you want to have a tool in your back pocket where you can go, the next time that happens, I'm going to do X. So, and that, if you look at the tools that Lisa kindly put up on screen for us, those are found on page 35 of the workbook. So, and page 35 shows up in tradition in step 2. Step 3. It shows up in step 3. So would anybody else like to share like a pattern they think they might encounter and take a look at, suggest a tool they might use, or we can all suggest a tool that they might use? We really are just about out of time though.
You've got Jennifer B.
Jennifer, take her away. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Wow, this has been a great workshop. Thank you. One of the ones that I have really, really become aware of recently in my life is this, that I am unlovable and unworthy. And that was a message all my life I've been told, don't be who you are. Don't be who you are. You are so bad. You are so unlovable. You are so not worthy. And I just accepted that all my life. And I think that has been the root of my codependency, trying to prove that, I'm not this horrible, evil person that I was taught that I was all my life. And that has led to all the people pleasing and the caretaking and the rescuing and the performing and all of the codependent stuff. So I'm not sure what tool would, I guess, connecting with my higher power and realizing that I was worthy all along. Yeah. And that this was like, in my family, my ancestors were slaves. And I think my parents' way of dealing with the shame was to just dump it all onto me. So they felt better not dealing with their shame, but basically saying, well, you're evil, you're bad, it's all you, but we're fine.
Yeah, that's one of our tendencies for sure. And there's too. Well, I think I am one of those people, Jennifer, thank you for sharing that. And that's very vulnerable of you. And I agree, drawing closer to your higher power is the remedy to, and honestly, for me personally, it's the remedy to everything. That's where I have to keep coming back to my higher power as the means to overcome, because my initial impulse is often still a dysfunctional impulse. The fact is today, because of recovery, I can go, oh, that's not a healthy response. They say discard the first thought, God is in the second thought. And so you may still have that impulse to think poorly of yourself or to make yourself smaller or dismiss your own wants and needs, but that with God's help, we can go, God defines my value. And he says, I'm perfect and beautiful. And I'm going to act out of a place of beautiful, perfect Jennifer, not shamed, beat up Jennifer. Does anybody else have any suggestions for Jennifer and for the rest of us who struggle with a sense of value? Anybody have a tool, whether it's on this list or one of your own invention that you have found especially helpful? Speak now or forever hold your peace, because we're about done.
You've got Karen.
Karen, thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen. I'm codependent.
Hi, Karen.
And I'm an American born and raised, but of a family history of, we call ourselves mutts because it's such a mix. Though the tool here that's standing out the most is reflect on the fact that I may not understand God. Also, I may not understand my own culture, because there are so many of the things that I wrote down where the values are a 1 and a 9 at the same time. Like this culture kind of glorifies people who are outstanding and outspoken and stand up, but at work and at church and here and there, trying to be the one that does that, it is not invited. It is not welcome. And so it's kind of like, well, what's the message here? I don't know. The message is confused. Maybe it's not me that doesn't understand. Maybe it's just not understandable. Or a blend, probably a blend. That's my share. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Karen. I am enough. Thank you, B, for sharing that. You can't locate the ISBN number for, are you looking for the workbook? Or the workbook, you can just Google CoDA Green Workbook or Codependence Anonymous Big Book.
If you go to CoDA.org, CoDA.org, there's a connection to literature there. And if you're in another country, if you look up your country's CoDA website, if they are publishing, much like Canada, for example, they have their own publishing company. Yeah,
that's so good to know. I didn't know that.
For sure.
And Eve, thank you so much for your comment about saying the connection for you. And B, also that affirmation, I am enough. I'm sorry, our time has come to an end. It has been wonderful being with you guys. There is going to be a closing session. We're going to get kicked out of the room in a minute. I'm going to suggest that we close with the we version of the Serenity Prayer. And then there will be a program closing in the main room. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change,
the courage
to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And guys, I can't emphasize enough, again, please exchange phone numbers. If you like what somebody shared, reach out to them personally, say, I really identify, get their phone number. I didn't do that. It took me a long time to connect with people. So thank you, Melissa. It was so good to see a familiar face.
Isabella, we do have one more session of workshops after this. So we have a break right now.
Sorry. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, so we're going to have
forget what I just said, everybody. There's one more session that starts at 3:25. Okay, so you're going to have a break from 3 to 3:15.
Yes.
And then from 3:15 to 3:25, you get the opportunity to return for room assignments. And those next sessions, for those of you who don't know, grief support and self-care is in 3A. I statements for safety's sake is 3B. And living centered through freedom from self, 3C. I might have to go to that one. All right. Thank you again, Lisa.
Thank you,
everyone. Thank you. So good to meet you all. Thank you.
I do, so thank God.
That's terrible. Seriously terrible.
Hi, my name is Cully. I'm a codependent. I had the experience of having to leave an entire group of friends because of that. Yeah. I was starting a business and I no longer could afford to split the check. All the money I had was going into the business. And when I started to ask for a separate check, I stopped being invited and we went our separate ways, which I still mourn the friendships, but I realized if they didn't have the capacity to understand how hard it is to start a business, then, maybe they're not good friends after all.
So you can just move them back on the levels to a 1 or a 2. You can still have a relationship with them. It's just not a trusting one. They're not trustworthy. So.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen.
Yeah. Hi, Karen. You answering questions? This is Yvette.
Sure. Hi, Yvette.
Hi. Quick question. I was curious, and this is confusing to me, and this is pre-CoDA. And so I was in I thought a friendship with someone, and we would go out to lunch or breakfast after church. And then I'm getting back all of these comments about you like a sister to me, you like a best friend. My assumptions, we were in a good friendship. And long story short, after about 6 to 8 months, this person ghosted me, and then they started ignoring me. So I just questioned whether it was so confusing, whether or not it was an actual friendship in the first place, or
unfortunately, she had a reason to have you in her life.
Okay. You just went frozen. Oh, you just froze again.
A friend of mine said it just, she said the horns on her head matched the holes perfectly. So that's why people match up like that aren't healthy.
Okay. It's just the bottom line. We just hooked together because of the dysfunction.
Yep. Because you got something out of it too. You got to practice your pattern with her.
Unfortunately, that wasn't a good thing. It was very painful. It was a very painful, one of the most painful relationships that I've ever been in. And that's what brought me to CoDA.
Oh, hey, see there? You owe her a debt of gratitude, man. I agree. You should be on your Christmas list.
But you said you did freeze up. So you're saying that this person had me in her life for a reason. It wasn't just because of friendship or anything. But people typically say those things because of their dysfunction, or is it easy to say those things?
Right. They want to. No, it's like this phrase, I love you. We only say that for when we need something to change. We need the attitude to change, need something material. We need something. We need to think. I'm sorry, I'm trying to do this quickly. We need to make sure that person is still in love with us. So we say, I love you, and check their reaction. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
You betcha, Yvette. You're welcome.
Karen, can I ask you a question as well? So if you're in a meeting, I'm like 7 months into the program, and I was in a meeting the other day, and the chairperson was definitely like acting in a leadership role. The leader, the host of the meeting, and she was just telling people what to do. And then she told me, I want you to go and do, and I'm like, nope, I'm going to ask my higher power first. And she kind of paused, but then later on, she found somebody else who agreed. I want you to be the whatever rep for, and the girl was like, what do you want me to do? And so long story short, she was also like in the meeting, she cross-talked. I shared about something personal. Then when it got to her, she basically started sharing about her experience with that same subject matter and what she did and what should be done. And I was sitting there and I'm like, this is crosstalk. And I could get off of this session and I could feel guilty and hurt because it was a subject about suicide. And I was saying I didn't tell her, and she was like, well, you should have called. I called. And so my challenge is I have a friend who's also in that meeting. Do I inform the friend that their power is being stripped and this person is and like, what do I do from this situation? Or do I just walk away? Because I'm not going back, but I just want to see if I to do something. Yeah.
It's actually, there's nothing for you to do. He or she is going to have to learn that lesson privately. And there's nothing for you to do on this one. That's not your business. But, oh gosh, what was I going to say? Doggone, it was very poignant.
Was it about the crosstalk? Because sometimes people like crosstalk.
I was going to say that people are on different levels in their recovery. They might be beginners. They might have been there a long time, but are still beginners. There are people that have 20 years that I wouldn't trade one of mine for. So they get to be who they are, and you get to adjust your sails, and you're not going back.
Yeah, but in the meeting, if someone cross talks in that moment, like I felt like I went into fight, flight, fright, or freeze. I froze because I knew she was cross talking, and I'm like, do I stop in the meeting and say while she's doing it and say, excuse me, you're cross talking? And I know I would have been disruptive, but I just, you know what I'm saying? Like,
it's tough when she's the secretary because she's the one that's supposed to be doing that. But you can say point of order. I think that's cross talk, and then don't ever go back there.
Or maybe show up at the business meeting and have a discussion at the business meeting. Bring it up.
Yes, because if you embarrass somebody in front of other people, you're now a target. So.
Right. Okay. So call it out and don't go back, and maybe possibly go to the business meeting.
Yeah. If you want to keep going to that meeting, go to the business meeting and talk about it.
I wouldn't go to the business meeting, but thank you.
Eden, did you have?
Yes. Hi, Karen. What's that? Do you have like a group, like a meeting group that? I'm looking for a group.
I don't have a small group, but I do run a book study on Sunday nights, which is really great. If you want to email me, I'll send you the link to that.
Okay. How would I email you?
Nema, did you have something?
What's that? I didn't get your email.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Chat again. Here we go.
So everybody, the breakout rooms have been opened for the next session. So if you want to go ahead and you can assign yourself, and we'll do this dance again of trying to get everybody in there into the next ones. Again, this room.
Can you repeat what the breakout rooms are? I don't have the agenda in front of me. Is that too much?
So the room you're in currently right now is called the main room. It will be grief support and self-care. 3B, which is I statements for safety's sake. And 3C is living centered through freedom of self. So if you want to sit, grief will be in this main room here. The room you're in now is 3A, is what we call on the program 3A. And presenters, if you're here, you can go ahead and make sure before you go into your room, make sure you're a co-host. And if not, let us know.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
I could not get into this meeting. I could get into the 2 breakout rooms, but this was not an option. Did I do something wrong, or is it just I had to get out and get back in?
I think you just had to get out and get back